Fire is one of the biggest threats to a colony in Rimworld, so naturally we'll be playing with a species of fire-obsessed demons. Each of my colonists will possess the pyromaniac trait, which completely disallows firefighting, which means basically any small fire can get out of hand very quickly. Pyromaniac also means that they start fires when they get stressed out, and because they have the aggressive trait, that pretty much means all of the time. They also have a few other negative traits that you will see later on in the video. So join me today in an adventure and discovering why fire is bad and why pyromaniacs shouldn't procreate under any circumstances. After creating my demon characters, I dropped into my Rimworld. I created our stockpile zones and I immediately got into building our homeless shelter. Now in a normal playthrough, I would totally just use wood for this build, but because wood is extremely flammable, we're just gonna have to use steel for the time being. This makes this start a bit harder, but luckily there was quite a bit of steel in the area for me. Some of the goals that I have for this run, number 1 being don't die, number 2 being win game, and number 3, have as many babies as humanly possible. Or rather, demonly possible. Colonists happen to also start with a husky by the name of Splooge. All of our colonists are terrible with plants and animals, except this guy because he's really the only one that's good at anything important. So our main source of food will have to be from hunting. We were finally building up our house, and as soon as I got the research table down, I started researching batteries. Unfortunately for Sienna, she's the only one with a high research skill, so she's going to be slaving away for the rest of the foreseeable future. Now, since my main source of food for my colonists will be animals, I'm going to have to stretch it out as far as possible, since during the winter months, wildlife can be very scarce at times. So I plan to get a nutrient paste dispenser inside the kitchen as soon as possible. Even though eating tasteless futuristic paste is not ideal, it's better than not eating at all. Adam quickly got to hunting and Sienna was finally finished researching the batteries. Now at some point during the construction of our house, a wild child had roamed into our lands. He is a helixin named Daltrin, or whatever, and he's also pretty ugly himself. Some sort of snail-human hybrid, who quite frankly I wouldn't want in my colony anyway. We're just gonna let him roam and we'll just check in on him later and see what happens. Our first raid started shortly after this, a pirate named Manabu, who is also the same type as our colony. Before we could even attack him though, he was killed by a rabid wolf, and he exploded on death, which is also something our xenotype does, if everything else isn't annoying enough for you. Now, of course, after the rabid wolf killed this guy, he began targeting one of our colonists, Adam. And Adam started another wildfire with his vomit. It was super far from our base, and I was just kind of hoping it would burn out. My plan for the long term was just to speedrun researching fire foam poppers. The problem with fire foam poppers, though, is that it costs 2 components each time you want to craft one. Luckily for us, the game threw us a bone and it started raining, which diminished the wildfire pretty quickly. I was rushing to build the freezer as fast as possible so we could start getting a stockpile on food. A space transport pod did fall from the sky at some point, and a dog man was left bleeding on the ground. I ended up just letting him bleed out, since I don't think he'd fit in very well with the colony anyway, and also this is part of the challenge. No one but these fire-breathing demons allowed. I checked back in on Delatrin, it looked like he was dying of hypothermia, and I didn't really want to help him, so I'm pretty sure he just ended up dying at some point off screen, so rip Delatrin. Spring began, and you know what they say about like spring showers or whatever, so it started raining like almost every day. And since our colonists can't be even relatively normal, they all have thalassophobia, which means they're extremely scared of water. Over the next few days, our colonists began building up our house. During these days, it seemed like the colonists were getting more and more mentally unstable, and Adam began a fire starting spree, which surprisingly was the first one so far. He burnt down our brand new nutrient paste dispenser, literally the most important thing, and our beds, but they can just sleep on the floor. After Adam did this, I spent the next few days just rebuilding the base, and I got to the point where I finally had everything connected and the electricity was working again. Something about this sent another colonist into a spiral, and he burnt down our stove, which is the second most important thing. Shortly after this though, I rebuilt the nutrient paste dispenser, so the stove wasn't that much of a loss. After another day of hard work, we finally got the freezer working. During this time, it seemed that Sienna and Jake had started growing a liking to each other, which was great since Sienna is the only girl and I need her to start having babies ASAP. Another raid started the next day, and Jake easily took down the threat with just one shot of his vomit. Soon after this, Sienna was pregnant. Now, as these creatures are not normal humans, they do not just have babies. They lay eggs. And in about a week or so, Sienna should lay her first egg. And the next day, Jake began creating a nursery for the baby. We had plenty of meat, but we were definitely going to need baby food for when this baby arrived. So I sent all the colonists on a plant cutting run to try to get us some berries for the baby. This sent Sienna into a rage, and she began lighting a bunch of little fires. Thankfully, this time it was nowhere near the base, but it was a huge fire. The large fire was quickly diminished by the storm that rolled in soon after. So crisis averted. I was going to install some more fire foam poppers, the only problem being that we had 0 components. Like I mentioned earlier, these things cost 2 components to make. So unfortunately, we're just gonna have to stick with the 2 from earlier. And this turned out to be a terrible idea because Jake and Adam had a mental break right after. Jake assaulted a pregnant woman until she was downed, and Adam started a fire right next to my batteries, instantly destroying all 3 of them and a couple power conduits. Now, once again, it did start raining, which I was extremely thankful for. But why couldn't it start raining before all of my batteries exploded? It did take a little bit to repair all of the power, and during this time, Sienna finally laid her egg. Our colony was pretty broke, so I let Jake start making some sculptures so we could start making some more money. We had a good stockpile of meat going, so I was pretty confident we'd make it through the winter quite easily. The days were progressing well. Jake was constantly making sculptures, and we were hunting for food every day. At a certain point, Adam decided to assault the pregnant woman. I'm not sure why they always choose the pregnant woman to beat up, but at least she's not dead, I guess. Jake decided to join in on the fun the next morning, and honestly, I'm surprised she's not dead at this point. Sienna was a little mentally unstable, so shortly after this, she had a mental break and began binging on alcohol while pregnant. These people really shouldn't be parents. She drank until she got downed, and eventually stumbled her way back into the base. A trading caravan came into town, and I ended up selling some of the sculptures that Jake had been making. I ended up selling the rest of my beer as well, in order to stop the alcoholic pregnant woman from getting into the beer again. I used some of this money to start buying some winter clothes, because it was already fall and winter was coming soon. I guess the video game thinks I suck at it, since they sent me some fine meals on a cargo pod. At this point, I had fire phone pods in just about every single room, and outside most of the base. So I was pretty confident the next fire that would start, we'd be completely fine. Sienna also ended up laying another egg, which means now we have 2 eggs waiting to be hatched. Eventually, baby Caldwell was finally born. And since I never think ahead, I had to quickly make some baby food so the baby could eat. But thankfully, I would not have to deal with this long. The life stages of these xenotypes go really fast. And after a few days, Caldwell was a child. It was super cold out, and thankfully, Sienna had created some clothes for the children. Over the next few days, I added some more bedrooms to the base, because there is going to be multiple kids coming in the next few weeks. During this time, a raid had arrived, but Jake and Adam easily took down the fat fella. At this point, Sienna had finally researched gunsmithing, which means as we're popping out children, we'll also be popping out small soldiers and equipping them with large guns. On to plate armor next. It was time for Caldwell to grow up. He had 0 skills, and the only trait I could give him was psychically dull, which is completely useless. Because of their very fast aging, it was really hard to get the kids to level up at anything before they turned into teenagers. Soon after this, another transport pod had crashed on our land, and Jesus Christ himself was in pain shock on the ground. Despite this heavenly man being down in our land, my colonists let him freeze to death. It was also at this time another egg had hatched, and while Jesus was dying of hypothermia, Celia had been born. Over the next few days, we were making tons of clothes for the new kids and teaching Caldwell how to do things. Eventually, 2 of my colonists got sick, the newborn and Sienna. I thought maybe the newborn was gonna die, but soon she had aged up into a small child. I eventually made the gunsmithing table and started pumping out guns for our small child soldiers. Soon after this, we got word of an item stash nearby full of loot. So I decided to send Jake and Adam on a caravan to try to retrieve this loot, leaving only Sienna, Dude, and Celia here to defend the base. When Jake and Adam finally made it to the item depot, there's just a psychic soothe pulser inside. I guess I'll take it, but I was kind of hoping for a little more. The caravan made it back home the next day, and soon baby Burns was born. It was also around this time a dry thunderstorm rolled in, and some fires began to start. One of the fires was getting really close to the base. Thankfully, the fire foam popper went off and made it so that our base was okay. Once the dry thunderstorm ended, I thought we were safe. Dude started a large fire right outside the front of our base, and I didn't have a fire foam popper there by chance. The fire spread and broke both of my wind turbines, but thankfully, I built a fire foam popper just in time so it couldn't spread inside the base. Winter was finally over, and we were starting to get pretty low on food, so Adam began hunting again. He gathered quite a bit of food, and while Adam was doing that, Jake was building more bedrooms for the kids kids. Now, despite the numerous setbacks thus far, we had quite a few things researched, and we're halfway through getting microelectronics research. Just as things were going well for us, a fault in electro conduit started a fire right on top of our nutrient paste dispenser. It was spreading rapidly. The fire foam popper inside the freezer went off, stopping it from burning the rest of our food, and it almost burnt down our entire kitchen. I was able to get Jake to quickly build a fire foam popper so we didn't just destroy our entire base. The fire took out quite a bit of our power conduits, and everyone was on edge. I mean, every single person had a major break risk, mostly because our nutrient paste dispenser was broken and they were starving. It was during this time a 3-person raid. The biggest one we've had so far came onto our land. I was forced to make all these mentally unstable demons try to kill this raid. The first fire vomit took out one. Dude and Sienna just barely managed to take out another. During this, Dude was downed and Sienna was almost kidnapped, till Adam came out and took down the kidnapper. So since the nutrient paste dispenser was broken, all of our electricity was out, they were starving, had heat stroke, and some needed medical treatment. Things were not looking too good. Adam was the only one that could really do anything at this point since Jake was having a mental break. So Adam tried to tend to Dude as quickly as possible until, well, this happened. Dude died and exploded and started another fire inside the bedroom. There was literally nothing to be done. It took out most of our bedrooms, leaving most colonists without a bed. They were completely out of food and there was barely any wildlife in the area. So I sent Adam and Sienna on a caravan to try to retrieve more. This caravan was our last chance at survival. Unfortunately, Adam and Sienna ran into a hostile clan, and there was just no way they were gonna win this, to be honest with you. They both died pretty quickly, leaving us with only Jake and the 2 kids. I felt there was really no way of coming back from this. I was actually feeling quite suicidal at the time, so I had Jake open the ancient room. The children started another large fire while trying to take out the mechanoids. I thought it was so over, and then the game threw me a bone and sent a man in black to come save us. I was thinking, you know, this guy, he can put out the fire, he can maybe kill these crazy robot guys, and then I check his bio and you've got to be fucking kidding me.